Whether you spell it with one N or two, this city could be the place for you if you're fond of interesting sports venues. Here are the stadiums and arenas of Hanover, Germany. Eilenriedestadion. Like a surprisingly large number of stadiums in Germany, this one's named after a forest. This is Eilenriede over here. Although the stadium was technically opened in 1922, during a renovation just under 10 years ago, the pitch was rotated 90 degrees. So you can decide for yourself whether that makes it an entirely different stadium or not. The entrance to the original stadium is still standing, as well as part of the running track. You may have noticed the Hanover 96 crest there. It is currently just home to their reserve team and youth teams. However, the first team did call this place home at one point. It's an interesting look that the stands have got going on, vaguely reminiscent of a barcode. But it looks good, I suppose. I thought for a second that this building across the road might be an arena similar to the one we saw in Wrocław. And it is, kind of. More of a music-specific venue. Classical music for the most part, so we're talking your Backstreet Boys rather than One Direction. Stadthalle Hanover was built at around the same time as the Centennial Hall in Wrocław, which was under German control at the time. They actually completed this one in 1914, but a rather large conflict started around that time, so it didn't officially open until afterwards. The building was actually heavily damaged in the Second World War. That, by the way, is the ceiling, not a spaceship's airlock. Although... wow... But yeah, what a beautiful building. Stadion am Pferdeturm. A lot of European ice hockey arenas started out as outdoor venues, but generally, there are few signs of that past remaining. This one gained its roof in 1978, however it's still technically an open-air venue. The roof shelters every seat in the house and the rink, of course, but there aren't really any walls at the ends, so bring your coat. The capacity is mostly coming from standing room. Oh, and just outside the arena sits this peculiar tower dating back to the 1300s. It's called the Pferdeturm. Pferdeturm, that sounds familiar. But no, seriously, 1300s. That's well old, that is. It was a watchtower back in the early days. Yes, they would drop watches from the top to test their shock resistance. Oh, and you may have noticed that the club is called the Hanover Indians.
Sammy, you are wrecking the car!
Now, that name may seem politically incorrect nowadays. You know, especially considering that most teams are named after animals. But Germany's huge population of Native Americans have yet to speak out against it, so we're all good. Heinz von Heiden Arena. That name has nothing to do with the makers of baked beans and ketchup. Heinz von Heiden actually builds houses. Anyway, not important. I believe most of the locals refer to the ground as Niedersachsenstadion. Don't you just hate it when you cop a blow to the Niedersachsen? Awful feeling. This too was a previously multi-purpose stadium with a running track that was transformed into a football-specific stadium. Hence the slightly curved shape of the stands. The original stadium could accommodate over 86,000 spectators at its peak, and was actually the second largest stadium in West Germany at the time. It's not anywhere near as big nowadays, but it looks a whole lot better, and the spectators would of course be a lot more comfortable. I appreciate that the stadium has maintained its asymmetrical proportions. Also, the railing supporting the weight of the roof kind of looks like a roller coaster. Admittedly, it wouldn't be the most exciting roller coaster. Swiss Life Hall. This is indeed one building, it's just it has an oddly shaped roof. It serves as the part-time home of the biggest handball club in town, but it really hosts all sorts of different events, as you can see. I read that it sometimes even hosts stand-up comedy performances. Yet I was told that Germans don't have a sense of humour. This poses a dilemma. Does the audience just sit and watch the performance in silence? Or is the stereotype maybe not true? Now I have to start questioning whether there are actually some Russians that don't drink vodka every day. Or maybe that New Zealanders aren't actually sexually attracted to sheep. This has been enlightening. One stereotype is definitely true. Australians do fucking swear a fuck ton. Like fuck, I'm not even joking. Every other word is a fuck or a. Not me though, I would never. Rudolf-Kalweit-Stadion. Much like the concert hall we saw earlier, this ground opened in 1918. It actually predates this road here. I believe the government were trying to purchase the ground and have it demolished. But in the end, the club just had to demolish the terracing at one end. Interestingly, the roof of the one and only grandstand came from the little stadium next to Signal Iduna Park in Dortmund. We've covered the road and the grandstand. As for the rest of the field, well, it's bordered by aging terracing that looks like it's harbouring several dozen different species of plant life. I hope for the well-being of the spectators that there aren't any ticks in this area, because Lyme disease isn't as tasty as it sounds. Uh-oh. I hear ticks. ZAG Arena. I wonder if it were facing the other direction, would it be called ZIG Arena? Or is that not how it works? Hanover hosted Expo 2000, and this venue was built for the occasion. It's the other home of the handball team I mentioned earlier. But as you can see, it has hosted an ice hockey team in the past. Not the Indians, it was a team called the Hanover Scorpions, who actually play in a small arena outside the city nowadays. I can't help but feel that they were named after the Scorpions, the famous band from Hanover, who actually performed at this arena during Expo 2000. Here I am, rock you like a hurricane. Some honourable mentions now. Stadion is another forest-dwelling stadium. That is just slightly less impressive than the one we saw earlier, just a bit. Ostadstad. Interestingly, this place got that stand that the roof at... How do I word this? The roof... It got the stand that belonged to... That the roof of the one that was moved from Dortmund belonged to. That'll do. Wilhelm Lange-Stadion is actually in the nearby city of Garbsen. A few years ago it would have met the capacity cutoff, but safety requirements put an end to that. Stadion Bad. Much like the city of Islamabad is not suggesting that Islam is bad, Stadion Bad is not suggesting that stadiums are bad. Bad just means like bath in German. And you can see why it gets that name. Since I mentioned the Scorpions, I suppose I should include their arena in the town of Mellendorf. It's called ARS Arena. Best to keep the ARS as an initialism rather than an acronym. This is just a shed compared with their old home. Oh, and yes, I did check, they are named after the band. So there you have it, that was a fun one. I like variety, und das ist wat wir sind. As for my favourite, well, I'm gonna disregard this one because it's not a sports venue. So it's gotta be the Niedersachsen. It would have been an absolute no-brainer if the roof were an actual roller coaster. Maybe one day. Thanks for watching, have a good one.